Very, very soon. We're going to have I think we've got a little bit of vision of him from last Friday night's sneaky little performance, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But here they are training down at Glenferrie Oval the other night, and they did look okay the other night, the Hawkers. They got pipped in a tight one, but they had Western Bulldogs measure for about 2.5, 3 quarters, with a lot of players out, I might add.
I did manage to get down there to training, as we have done, and this is the last of the clubs virtually that we've touched on, and we're going to catch up with some interesting players a little bit later on.
They're really one of the real interesting sides to watch this year, given the fact that nobody after their dismal performance in 1995 gave them any hope at all of climbing into any sort of significant heights last year. For them to work their way into the 8, Ken Judge was profoundly involved in that, more so than a lot of coaches.
It showed a fairly significant change in their attitude too towards the end of the season. So I think that'll be interesting if they can carry it on.
They went through though. I mean, halfway. I mean, their run home was in the second half of the year, and it was virtually the second half of the year that, of course, all the turmoil was around with the amalgamations.
Which probably adds credit to what they did, doesn't it? It wasn't as if they got on a spectacular winning streak. They just did it with real sort of blue-collar determination, and guys like Craig Treleaven came in and unheralded sort of recruits who had a real impact. He was getting 30 possessions a week, and Daniel Chick made a bit of a difference. And
well, was a young bloke nominated for the Norwich Rising Star last year. Ken Judge stole him from Western Australia, brought him over here. And,
where he gets all his players.
Well, that's a point, yes, valid point. But, I mean, having a look at him at training the other night, he spent some time in the gym and really built himself up. In fact, I'm surprised, even just looking at the Lance Whitnells and these kids that we saw last year in the under-18 comp, how much bigger they got at the launch of that Norwich dinner we went to through the week.
It obviously becomes the major focus of all clubs whenever they get any of these kids into their programs. They just want to put muscle on them and get them ready for senior football as quickly as possible.
Talking of big men, caught up with Paul Salmon, and despite the big fish, of course, missing a few games early season last year with a calf injury, I think it was at the time.
It was.
He certainly had his knockers that he might perform well, and so did Hawthorn have their knockers about recruiting as well too. He answered them the only way he could.
To win the best and fairest was beyond my expectations, and I was just over the moon, and still am. But it's in perspective, you know. It was first year up, there was a lot of passion involved in my football last year when I did hit the field, and I've got to maintain that. And I've no doubt in my mind I can. I'm very single-minded about what I want to achieve. Leaving Essendon wasn't a light decision. It wasn't something I took very lightly. So I've only got a few years to make, to have a lot of water pass under the bridge today. I have high expectations of myself now, and so I'd like to build on that. But mate, I couldn't believe it. I've joined some pretty illustrious names on the Hawthorn honour board now.
Well, as a ruckman, you've proved yourself, but there always seemed to be that problem at Essendon that you could never do what I think you really wanted to do and what you love to do. If you had your time over again, do you think you'd have made that move a little bit earlier?
I threatened earlier. I threatened back in '91. I didn't decide I didn't threaten the club. I just toyed with the idea of moving. Brisbane were the suitors at that stage. But in hindsight, I think if I was given the opportunity to be Essendon's ruckman, then I probably should have been the last year or two of Simon Madden's career. Then I probably would still be at Essendon and hopefully performing at the level I expected myself at that club. But I don't deal too much in hypotheticals. I'm glad I've got the opportunity now for at least a few years. Hopefully it's not too late physically, and it's not too late mentally, but physically just to extract what I think is some good football out of myself, and if I do that, then all good for me and for the Hawthorn Footy Club, you know.
How important is it this week for you to beat St Kilda? First game, it's 97.
Absolutely crucial, Rob. We can't underplay the importance of knocking over the Saints. We know they're a good side, and we've had trouble with them over the last year when I was with my first year at Hawthorn. And so this game is just vitally important. Every team wants to get off to a good start, and we've got a lot of respect for them. We're going to have to be really playing at our absolute best to beat them. But it would be a great start to the season if we can knock them over and get those 4 points, mate. It would set us up, with a lot of confidence, because we've got a pretty tough start. The first half dozen rounds. If we're after a challenge, we've certainly got one there.
Yeah, the draw's not kind to them, Andrew. Those first 4 or 5 games, but as he said, tough. It'll get them off to a good start, but I mean, there's just so much pressure, not only on you guys to perform so well on the ground nowadays, because if you don't perform well on the ground, the corporate dollar drops away, everything drops away, and it's dog eat dog out there.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of pressure on everybody, from the administrators right down to the fellow right on the bottom of the list.
Well, it'll be interesting just keeping an eye on him, particularly this week, because in that practice game out there on Friday night, he did nick his groin and came off halfway through the second might have even been the first quarter, didn't reappear and did look to be in a little bit of distress. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes up this week, and a big bloke of that
I
size.
think he had a scan on it tonight, actually. That's the latest bit of news.
And how is
I
his
have.
groin?
Well, I wasn't talking about his groin, actually, but I just know, ringing around the traps, that he went in, had it scanned for whatever the scan's going to prove or produce.
It's funny, I think Judge is a really good coach because he was at Carlton for a while, but he makes players very honest. He really puts the asset on them, and they've got to really perform accordingly, and they've got nowhere to hide with Judgy. And I think it's worked very well with Paul Salmon. He's thrown him into the ruck. He said, do it, shut your detractors up, or,
He did have a habit of not being a very good worker on the track, though, at Essendon, wasn't he? He wasn't fond of pre-season training and things like that.
Oh, yes, but I don't think you can use that as criticism for any.
Just you mentioned...
No, you're saying there's no place to hide. I mean,
But I mean in terms of football, when you're playing a game that you can't just sort of loiter around the side of the ground trying to get easy kicks, you've got to be in there getting the hard ball, and I think Paul Salmon's responded well.
Far be it from me to say that Ken Judge was a player who loitered around the outside getting easy kicks, but he was a classical half-forward flanker who made people pay without getting stacked.
He disappeared and then came in.
But there are a lot of coaches out there like that, aren't there, that do what I say, not what I do, because, this Parko was never a skillful player. You've got to...
But he's very much a defensive coach who builds his sides around that. I mean, are you surprised that Ken Judge has become such a disciplinarian and hard taskmaster now that he's a coach?
I know he probably appreciates that he didn't enjoy it when he played, but he probably realised that he played his best football with that. So he's probably using that as his same formula for players that he's coaching. Sure.